Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lovecraft Country. A great episode, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I was listening to Fat Man Beyond, the most recent episode. It was kind of interesting because Kevin had already seen this episode. He basically referenced saying it was very Indiana Jones specific. I think he said Raiders of the Lost Ark. And when you watch this episode, you're like, oh, you definitely get them Indiana Jones type of vibe. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But obviously it's Christina showing up at the house first and Letty. And it's so interesting because Letty's like, you're the one that bought the house because she pieced it all together. It's like, the fact is Tick didn't tell you that was kind of interesting. But she's like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is you've already died once because of Tick. Don't let him be responsible for you dying again because he came and put a gun on him. You were going to get mixed up in all of this and die because of him. And it's like, don't... Tick might have special blood in him, but that doesn't make him special. That this doesn't all revolve around him. It's kind of interesting because the lady kind of throws that back in his face later on in the episode, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. But Christina can't actually get in the house, but she's looking for the device that it turns out Hippolyta took, which I'm like, I guess maybe there was some impulse or something to it because she came across it last episode. I didn't even think about it, but it's like I'm wondering what compelled her to take it. I guess it's because it turns out she's connected to this world. I think all those science and stuff. I think that's something between her and her dad because she's talking to her dad about it over the phone because I guess she's fascinated with stars and stuff like that. I guess that's kind of the realm of the world she's trying to be in, but I guess it's being black, she probably can't really get far in that world, but it seems like she's got a good head on her shoulders when it comes to the planets and stars and stuff like that. But it's really interesting because it turns out because Christina's talking to what's his name, Lancaster, because he didn't appreciate the fact is because we end up finding out that there's actually 34 other lodges, and it turns out Lancaster's connected to one of those lodges, but he's not actually an official member of the order. But he calls Christina out because he's like, you're not one either, because it's a man only thing, a white man only, so no women, no coloreds type of situation, But what I thought was interesting though is she's playing so coy, being like, oh yeah, black people moved in. How'd you let that happen? It's okay, being coy, even though you're the one who set this whole situation up. So I guess it's because, for her, she doesn't care about the lodges because she has her own goals in mind. She has this and that. It's a reason why, because she doesn't, because it's why be a part of an order that's just going to, hold her back? Yes, she can take advantage of them, but it's why be a part of a boys club that won't mean you've never been invited to, even though this is kind of your legacy because it's your family, but you're still kind of kept out because it's a boys club, once again, a white boys club, but for her to be oh yeah, she's I tried to go over there looking for the order, but it's I guess that's why she got Letty there in the first place, because I guess she wanted Letty there so she could be in a position where she could try and get it from Letty, but it's I guess she didn't think it'd be that easy. I think either that lady they were getting to exercise the ghost last episode, either she wasn't dead and she survived and she set up the place so that it could be protected, or they did that themselves. They just took what they learned from her and did it. Whatever the case may be, it seems like their house is enchanted, so she can't come in. I guess it's kind of a thing that kind of keeps out evil. I guess it's almost like a vampire thing of it seems like you might have to be invited in, because William goes there later on with Ruby, which I thought was kind of interesting because I figured Ruby was a piece to this whole puzzle. I figured she was a piece in the sense that they were going to use her as a means to get close to Letty and them. I thought they might do something oh, we got Ruby mixed up in this, and if you want her out of this, you're gonna have to cooperate with us. You're gonna have to work with us. Because it seems because obviously William had talked about it in episode 2, him and Christina's relationship. He's like a friend sometimes, but it's just kind of he kind of serves her, more so than anything and anybody else, I guess. But because he was beating the crap out of Lancaster's people who had, is it Lancaster or was it Lannister? I think it was Lancaster. Regardless, beating the crap out of his other people that had shown up, which I thought was pretty impressive. They're I guess they're not all cops, and maybe some of them are. I mean, even if they were, they can't really do anything to William necessarily. I mean, he really beat the shit out of him. It's sorry gentlemen, I got a date. The moment he referenced that, I was oh, you're gonna go see Christina. It's no, his date's with Ruby. even when he was saying stuff like, "Oh, I can make your whatever it is you want in this world, I can make it come true." I was like, it's going to be that magic thing of like everything comes with a price, and once again, Letty and them would have to be the ones that pay the price to potentially save Ruby. That's what I thought was kind of set up. Still doesn't mean it won't be, but they went back to, I'm assuming that is Letty's place they went back to, right? So, because that's what I was wondering, like, because she is part owner or whatever, she's someone who lives there, so maybe that was her other place. I don't know, but like, because part of me was wondering like if he's invited in kind of like a vampire thing, he has free. It might also be because it's like, maybe it also depends on your intentions, maybe because of the spell that's on her right now, it blocks her from getting, but I feel like it's more so probably like it has to be like either an intentions thing, or maybe it is like I don't know, maybe it is kind of like a white people gonna come in type of thing. I don't know. Just that whole storyline was interesting, because it's actually sad too, because like, Ruby was trying to work at that department store, but then she sees that other colored lady there, and it's like, wait, what's this all? It's like, oh, so because she had talked about it last episode, about getting a resume up and everything, and it's like she was trying to get a job here, but it's like, oh, there's already one black girl working here, and no way in hell they're going to hire another one, so, and for her, and it's kind of sad, that statement from her being like, it's a race, winner takes all type of situation, and it's just kind of like, she's trying to figure out what she's going to do about it, but them shacking up, I thought it was interesting, because when you look at William's chest, he's got like a symbol, like almost like a brand burned into his skin, almost, it seems like. I'm wondering what that's about, but regardless, Letty ends up tracking down Tick and ends up getting pissed at him about everything. My favorite thing about that whole library scene is that little boy that kept going shh. The second time he literally got out, he was like, he was so pissed. It's like, I came to the library to read and you disturbing me. And then a third time he's talking about some shh. It's like, I would have been like, boy, if you don't shut the hell up and I'm a grown man, don't tell me to shush. I don't know. I was surprised Tick didn't say anything, but I guess he's like, I respect the fact that you want to read, kid. I just thought that was the funniest thing. That kid kept telling him to shh. I guess he's that invested in his reading. But nevertheless, it is this interesting thing where it's like, wait, like Letty seeing that like Tick had some of his stuff gathered up. It's like, you were going to leave. It's like after everything that was happening, but it's like Tick kind of made it clear that he was planning to leave anyway. But I guess it's like, I guess she was feeling probably even more so like, after everything, you were still going to leave anyway. Like, it's kind of clear how we both feel. But I think for Tick, it's like, I mainly want to stay because I want to make sure that you and my family are safe. But it's also a thing of like, Tick is keeping everyone at a distance. He never really says it to Letty, but my assumption was just the entire time was just like, it had to be because of George. George died and he blames himself for George's death, so he didn't want, he didn't want Letty to get mixed up in that. I'm sure the same thing kind of applies to his dad, because regardless, despite the complicated relationship he has with his dad, Montrose is still his dad, at least to his knowledge. But that's still the man who raised you, because even Montrose was kind of, I think, a lot of that was kind of flowing over his head. I think stuff with George, stuff with Atticus, probably stuff with his own dad, whatever the case may be. And he's reading that book that George apparently left him before he died, and it's like, nope, I'm burning it, because it's like, it's meant to be something. It's like, give this to Tick. It'll give him what he needs to protect all of you, But Montrose wants Tick to have nothing to do with this world, and sadly Tick has to dive deeper in this world if it means protecting his family from whatever it is. Christina, I mean, obviously she has that kind of invulnerability, but also whatever else is out there. I mean, it's like, you got crazy white people with magic. It's like, he needs something to protect his people, those who are important to him and everything. And so he ends up talking to Letty and Montrose, because obviously Letty goes to Montrose because he knows more about this, because Tick had looked through all those bookmarks, like, oh, who's the last person to check out? It's like Montrose. So it's like, Tick is far behind in all of this. His dad is a step ahead, knows everything, but his dad doesn't want to let him know anything because he doesn't want to drag him deeper into this. It's like, I think for him, it's like, my brother died in my arms, but it's like, not only are you're my son, but more so than anything, you are his son. So even more so, it's just kind of like, out of respect to George, out of respect for your mother, I need to make sure that you're okay, that you don't dive deeper into this, because it's just, it's like, stubborn and crazy, that being, Atticus and Letty, that they kind of they go hand in hand together, and, Letty's like, I finally see where Tick gets it from because you're a real asshole. But he's like, all right, he reluctantly gives in. So, and I love that whole scene between Tick and Letty. Like, he's trying to put a bag in, she takes it out to put it in herself, and he's putting the bag in, and then they're struggling over the bag. She's like, let it go, and he lets it go, and he's like, hey, you told me to let it go. I'm like, you guys are so petty. And he's like, all right, don't get mad at me. This wasn't my idea. But it turns out Hippolyta and Dee are coming along too. I'm like, oh crap. It's like, oh yeah, they think, oh, we're going to this museum and everything. Because I had skipped over it, but obviously it's the whole thing about them trying to find the vault that Titus had left the pages in. So, but it's like, we're breaking into the museum. Did you tell them that? It's like, no, we're borrowing Hippolyta's car, so I had to tell her where we're going, so they want to go too. So, and then I also love that, what's his face? Tree ends up tagging along too. I love that. It's just like as they're pulling out, he's like, "Oh, rather have him spend money on a bus fare. Mind if I tag along?" I'm like, "Wait, what are we doing? Bringing all these extra people?" It's like, "Sure, come along." I'm like, I was kind of hoping they would get mixed up in the adventure, but luckily they didn't. Like, luckily for them, but still. What I thought was kind of interesting though. Was that line between Letty and Tree, where Tree was basically like, because Tree was like, oh, you know what they call me, Tree? Because most people got 2 legs. I got Tree. And she's like, yeah, shouldn't I already know that after we fucked in high school? And it's like, ooh, right. Because that's what I was wondering. I was like, because last episode I was like, did I misinterpret that? Like, he said they were doing, that's why I was like, oh, did I misinterpret that? Could I have just been making out? It's like, no, he was in fact implying that they had sex. And it's like, obviously we know they didn't because she was a virgin. So it's like, but obviously he gets pissed at, Atticus, because he's like, oh, I get it why you did that, because obviously, hey, you and Letty's whole thing is your thing, but he's like, the fact is, he's like, I get it, you getting payback at me for the whole Sammy thing. At first I was like, what's the whole Sammy thing? And it's like, oh yeah, like him and Sammy in that whole alleyway situation. It's like, that's what it was about. He's like, yeah, whatever, that's Sammy's business. But then he was like, yeah, like Sammy and your dad have been getting pretty close lately. So I'm wondering, is that what that was kind of implying? And then Atticus was looking, I was like, huh, is that what I'm wondering, is that what that could have been? Maybe I might be reading too much into that. Either that's supposed to be like, well, Sammy's got connections, and on a more, it seemed like they made it almost seem like Sammy was kind of like the criminal connection type, like he might be like a gangster, like maybe that's kind of implying like that, or it could be implying like his dad, Montrose, might be gay, which, I don't know. I don't know what that's kind of implying there. I mean, it could be implying both. I think that'd be interesting if that ended up being the case. If his dad was gay, that would kind of also probably explain the whole, like, probably him and, Atticus's mom being together was just kind of supposed to be a front. I mean, obviously you're black, potentially, and if you're black and gay in this time frame, it's probably like super fucked up. Like, you're doubly screwed, is essentially what I'm saying. So, but obviously they kind of, we also learn a little bit, like I said, the whole thing about Hippolyta I thought was kind of interesting, was like the whole, like, she's like, oh yeah, I named like this star system or whatever, and Dee was like, oh really? It's like, yeah, but obviously because it's like Swedish people are like, we don't really want a black little girl to be like the face of our thing, so they gave the credit to someone else, but she's like, at the end of the day, for Hippolyta, it's like, as long as we know the truth, that's all that matters, So, but I thought it was kind of sweet, her daughter being like, oh yeah, my mom named that. So it's like, now they know the truth. And I thought that was kind of a sweet thing. But regardless, they come back at the middle of the night in the museum. Once again, we get into some Indiana Jones adventures and stuff like that. The moonlight reflecting, hitting the tooth. You move the tooth, it opens the doorway. They end up going down. Letty smashing that thing open, grabbing the map, and obviously Atticus being like, no, just let me scope everything out first. But then, like, all of them kind of piecing it together, like, which direction to go. Because I thought maybe it's like multiple tunnels. So I thought, like, are we all going to split up? Obviously, it's a thing of you pick the wrong tunnel and you die. But it's actually Letty who actually picked the right tunnel, because it was like the last expedition Titus had gone on or whatever. And then it's like, oh yeah, this was like 1810. That was like 3 years later. He, created the order or whatever. them walking to that plank and having to cross it, that was so interesting. That's like, oh, he's tying, it's like a special knot. And she's like, is this not really going to hold, what if I fall to my death? It's like, and then like, Montrose is telling the story of like, oh, the fact of the matter is like, he learned it from me, and I learned it from my father, who learned it from his father. It was a past freeman who was a slave, and he had told this, very inspiring story. And then as Letty's getting across, Tick goes, no freeman was a slave. And he was like, but it got her across it. And I was like, man, you bullshit a good story, don't you? Which I guess is just kind of like I know how to tie a really good knot. I told Tick how to tie a good knot. Maybe there was some truth to it, probably just not the slave bit to it, but regardless. So it's not like some special family tradition. I mean, maybe technically it is, but Letty's getting across. Then there's like, once again, just like your typical booby trap thing of a swinging, like kind of axe like blade, Tick going across, telling Letty like, okay, you got to time this. And I love that like the board starts to disintegrate. I'm like, okay, didn't see that coming. So I love that he's like, all right, Tick's like, throw me the bag. Montrose throws him the bag. He drops it, and he's like, you better catch me, boy. And he does, and it's like, oh, now we got to run across. It's disintegrating. Let's get past the blade. Okay, damn it, there's a door. Okay, put in the sequence, and they made it. Which is a pretty tense scene. I like that, because I was like, oh boy, because you're going to be falling and plummeting to your death if you don't make it. But then as they're making their way through, the tunnel's starting to fill up with water as well. So it's kind of like, we've only got like an hour before water fills up this tunnel. But then as they were going across, I thought it was interesting that there was a body. And she's like, oh my God, that's one of my neighbors. I was like, what? I was like, how is that possible? That neighbor was at the bottom of your house, like as we saw at the elevator. And then they start moving forward, and then the elevator pops up. It's like, oh, this is that exact tunnel. It's so interesting. So your elevator takes you can go directly here. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to know, but it's like, oh, so that all connects in that regard. That's interesting, because they said they were only walking for like 20 minutes, and yet somehow they magically ended up like back there, because they went to Boston. I mean, I don't know like the distance from where they were to Boston, but regardless, I was like, that's interesting. And so Ticket's like, all right, you guys got to get on board. And she's like, no. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Like what Christina had told her about, like, oh, like he isn't special just because she's like, this isn't about you. You're not the center of everything. And kind of goes on. Like, she kind of felt like, stop trying to make this seem like, oh, this is only happening to you. We're all mixed up in this. This is just, you're not someone special, that this is just happening to you. And like I said, in my mind, it's just Tick was just trying to protect him, because he feels guilty enough, because he already, like, in his mind, it's like, oh, I literally already got you killed. Luckily, you came back. Uncle George wasn't as fortunate, so for him, it's like, I'd rather take on all of this myself than you. Because there was this whole thing, like, there was this whole, before that scene was a whole thing about like, oh, is that what they taught you in the army, to leave a man behind? He was like, I never left a man behind. Like, I think for Tick, that was kind of that was like very offensive thing to even suggest like I would leave anyone behind, like on the battlefield type of situation. It was like, like I think as a soldier, like that's what kind of like, just that statement in itself I think would probably tick off any soldier, for you to kind of like, those are your brothers in arms, and it's like you never leave a man behind, type of situation. I just thought that was kind of an interesting line. Like, could we only touch here and there on his military past, but I'm assuming that's going to become even more and more of a thing later on, because there's still so much about that. It gets brought up a little bit here and there, but like I said, it's not something that gets fully dove into. But I'm curious to see if what he did, comes back, because it seems like obviously it haunted him, because like the lady that that's played by Jamie Chung that attacked him in episode 2, like obviously it wasn't real, but still like that's connected to so stuff like that. But and then they there was that scene with Montrose and Tick, because Tick kind of felt bad about the whole Letty thing. He was like basically apologized to her, and he's like, Tick's like, I don't know if it's going to be as simple as that. It's like I thought it was kind of interesting what Montrose was telling him, is basically like, your mom was kind of a lot that, basically saying like your mom was almost like a lot to handle too, but it's like, well, to be fair, she was able to kind of deal with you and put up with you. He was like, you got a point there. But it's like, he's like, my dad told me, like, basically you pick your favorite love song or whatever and you sing it in your head, like, and all the fussing a woman does, it'll be done by then, because that's what, that's what the fuss is, a whole lot of love. It's just kind of like, I think the whole point, and I could have easily misconstrued it, but I think the whole point is like, take a beat, is basically take a step back, play the self-song. They realize like, the spats between Tick and her is just simply because they do care for each other. There is love there. Like, that's all this is. It's just, complicated feelings of love because of how they feel about each other and the tumultuous situation they found themselves in. But they got to the door and everything. There's an arm. It's kind of like, well, didn't have the right keys, so Tick puts on the ring, sticks his arm in there. And I was like, okay, I think everything's going to be okay. And then he starts bleeding. And I was like, shit. Because I was expecting it just going to be a thing of like, because Lydia pointed out earlier, I was like, oh, you're bleeding. So I thought he'd just take a little of his blood. I figured that would be the key. Turns out it is. But it's just like his arm kind of had to get cut open a little bit so he can bleed more. So that ends up opening the doorway. And they go through. And there's all these bodies around, and it's like, oh, they're the pages, and then like a body comes to life and everything. I was like, oh shit, and then it starts like getting flesh, and it's what's the character's name? Yahima, I think. And it's like, okay, so basically she was someone that Titus had taken because he wanted her to translate it for her, and she didn't think like, she's like, oh, I didn't feel the need to distrust him. But then, he kept her prison when she found out his true intentions. All she wanted to do was be reunited with her people. And he's like, I'll do that for you. And he ended up murdering all her people. And I thought was kind of interesting is like, even though Tick's speaking English, for him, I guess because of Titus's blood, he's able to understand her. And later on, stuff made me wonder, could Montrose actually understand her the entire time he was just playing dumb? Whatever the case may be. It is a thing of like, he can understand her, like, Tick being able to understand what she's going through and what she's feeling, because obviously he's like, I get what you want to do. Like, he's like, I'm sorry for what, Titus did to you, but could you help me in any shape or form, because I want to be able to protect my people. But obviously for her, it's like, you're not branded by the sins of your forefather, but I don't know your spirit, so I won't help you. But Tick, they end up taking the scroll, water starts pouring in, and they grab her, and they head for the elevator as the water's gushing in. The scroll flies out, and I was like, the pages fly away. It's like, damn. Because I figured Atticus was going to grab her and make her not go, but it's like, she swims for it. They're keeping the door open. She grabs it, swims back, and it's like, yeah, they did it. And then, like, Atticus just kisses her because obviously, it's just kind of like all that, this, I was like, okay, so I think that's their way of making up and everything. So I thought that was pretty dope. But then Yahima starts screaming, and I was like, oh, is she like a banshee or something? But then later on, they're like, no, she's a siren. And I was like, okay. So, but then on the drive, like, we see Hippolyta and Dee driving, and it's like, how did they get back home without Woody? It's like, I have no idea. And I'm like, oh shit, because Home Dude's not with him too, because Tree was only there because he was trying to get a ride there anyway. But I thought that was interesting. Obviously, it's like the map falls out, and it's like, oh, about Devon County and everything. She's like, I'm going to get answers. Like, oh, don't go there. Because for one, it's like, well, because obviously she knows there was some stuff about George. She just couldn't put her finger on, but she knew something wasn't right, the story that they told. But it's like Devon County, you don't want to go there. There's a lot of, there's a lot there, so. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where things kind of go on that front of things, especially if she finds out, like, because eventually, I think even just based on the trailer, you see that they will eventually get dragged into this. It might not just even be them. There might be other people. We'll kind of see how everything kind of flows. But at the same time, it's like it turns out, like, being turned into a siren, the moment she left that place, like, she'd lose her voice. So she wouldn't be able to help anyone else with all this. This was Titus's way of kind of protecting the secrets with all of that, So it's just kind of a thing of, Ticket's like, well, we'll teach her English because it'll be easier for her to just write it in English than us being the ones that kind of decipher and stuff like that. So, and then Montrose is like, I'm very proud of you, Tick. You're very brave, being able to do all that you've done, you're able to accomplish. So it's like, hey. And then Montrose was going in the room, and that scene right there, as things were leading up to, I was like, okay, this is going to be the thing that he's going to pretend like either he's going to talk to her in a language, or it's going to be a thing of like, he's going to be like, oh, I've been able to understand you the entire time, I just didn't let on. And then he leans in and he goes, I'm sorry, and he slits her door. I was like, what the? So once again, it's like, I don't think it's just based on that book he got from George. I think Montrose knows way more, because obviously he's been researching this for a while, but obviously there's a lot more secrets in this that he knows that he's not. I guess it's just simply back to the thing of, in his own way, he's trying to protect Tick because he doesn't want Tick to get dragged into this, because it's like, this is just probably like a pathway to death for you and everyone else. So it's like, for him, it's like, this is the only way I can make sure to protect my son. I haven't always been the greatest father, because my father wasn't the greatest father, wasn't the best brother all the time. So it's like, as not even though I'm your father, but more so I'm actually your uncle, I'm going to do what's best for you. So I'm going to look after you, and instead of your father, my brother, I'm going to try and keep you safe. Or, I'm taking it as he has altruistic reasons for doing what he's doing. I'm wondering, is it really just going to be that quick? I guess it's just going to be like, well, what happened to her? It's like, I don't know, someone must have came in here and did something, or maybe he's just going to make her disappear. Who knows how that's all going to play out. But I'm so curious to kind of see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.